coming to you live from the home of
chaos,
Meatloaf and I resident Caps fan, and she's holding court right now, so please excuse that, but you know how it is being a parent, grandparent, guardian. You know how it is. Welcome to another edition of the Sideline Junkies DC Sports Rundown. You got the Midnight Ride. I don't like that color. I got to change that color on that banner. That's too much like a Dallas color or something. But you got the Midnight Rider sitting there with myself, the big guy KG. Let me change this color real quick before we get this started, because this is going to be quick and we're going to get it going. And let's change it. I don't even really like that, but we'll deal with it. That's better than that daggone blue. But first and foremost, let's get into the meat and potatoes of it. Washington loses badly yet again. Second week in a row. Seems like no fight was put up. They lose 24-8 to the Philadelphia Eagles. Stat line, let's start with Washington. Carson Wentz, 25 of 43, 211 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. Antonio Gibson, 12 carries, 38 yards in the TD. Curtis Samuel, 3 carries, 13 yards. J.D. McKissick, 3 for 8. Scary Terry had his coming out party this season for the first time this season. 6 catches, 102 yards in a losing effort. Curtis Samuel, 7 for 48. And Dotson shut down, 2 for 10. Mill, 1 for 12. Logan Thomas, 2 for 5. Like, where's the spreading around of the ball, man? It's not getting spreaded at all. We came up with 2 sacks from Jamin Davis. Obata gave us a sack. Jamin Davis is number 7 in the league in sacks, which I guess is silver lining.
Well, I think the problem is the sacks aren't really they're empty calorie sacks. So like one of the sacks on Sunday, it was Jalen on a rollout, slides down, Jamin touches him down. It's like a 1-yard sack. And then the other one was like maybe because the ball was a couple feet behind the line of scrimmage, Jamin got credit for that sack. So I think his best sack was the one that got taken off the board opening week against the Jaguars, where he came scraping around and hit the quarterback. And then his second best was the one against Detroit. Only one of those counted, and that was the one against Detroit. So that's why we're here at 3. But I think we talked about this in the pregame. Like I told you, we gotta put them in simple situations. It's got to be attack, cover, attack or cover. Because I watched him in a couple situations where even the back was coming out, he was coming up so aggressive on the back, out of the backfield, that he was almost putting himself out of position. So once the back made a move to the out or to the left, I mean, whichever way he did it, Jamin was dead to rights. So you got to watch. He's got to watch some of that stuff on how he's attacking the back as he's coming out of as they're coming out of the backfield.
And you know what? I've watched him, and we're going to start with the defense. I've watched him. I've watched the defense. I've seen him play a lot better position-wise. I've seen him play this season. He shouldn't have got called out and this, that, and the third. Yeah, call him out, because he seems to be the type to respond to that. And he's responding very, very well to constructive criticism.
He's flashed more in plays. Whether he's the first guy, the second guy, he's been around the football a lot more in the last 3 weeks than he ever was last year. And so maybe this is his version of his rookie season. And if at the end of the year, he's got 3 now. Who's to say he can't get 7 or 8? End up with double-digit sacks. Mm-hmm. It's just one of those things where if the breaks happen for him, he's good to go.
Now we coming into week 4. And we know after week 4, we get in week 5, not looking past Dallas, and we'll talk about Dallas in a minute. Not looking past, but Chase Young comes back. Brian Robinson comes back.
Before we go there, let's go back a step, because we still talking about this defense. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of problems on this defense. Well, I'm not going to say a lot of problems, but there's some issues on this defense. So, and the reason I want to go back is because Wild Turkey or Wild Irish Rose, whatever number 37's name is, Wild Goose, he was in coverage and he looked so lost on those two occasions that he got pass interference penalties. I thought the first one should have been a holding instead of a pass interference because the ball wasn't in the air. But still, it was like he panicked the second the guy got a step on him and he went to grab. He didn't cover. He didn't use any of his technique in that whole situation. And then St. Juice looked good for the most part, besides that one slant late. But I think that was more of a fatigue issue than a coverage issue. And then Kendall Fuller. I call him Hot 29. Like, it's an audible. We don't care what you running. I don't care what everybody else doing. I'm letting you know right now, it's Hot 29. Wherever 29 Garden, that's where I'm going at. I used to call it the Josh Wilson.
Josh, ooh, that's a name from the past.
But now it's the Hot 29. It used to be Hot 26. Now it's Hot 29.
Let me say this. Speaking of the defense, and you brought up Kendall Fuller. Let me pull my chair up for this one because I need to say this. Kendall Fuller, St. Juice, and it's not just our DBs. It's any DBs. This is what I'm tired of. You look up at the scoreboard, you're down by over 20 points, and you're sitting there with an incomplete pass. You want to do all your dances and all that. Dog, look at the scoreboard. You're down. Like, I expect you to get some sort of penalty of, you just maul the receiver or something. All that. What are you doing that for? And they go when they got the safety, and I want to say it was Deron Payne that got it.
Yep.
And he got up and he did his little dance and everything. Dog, we're still down. What were we down at that time? 24-2?
Yep, it's 24-2.
Like,
so some of this might be us just being old men yelling at a cloud, like the old Simpson clip. But
no,
I get what you're saying. Because because I actually posted. Actually, it was last week. I think like somebody scored a touchdown and they did the shush thing. I'm like, dog, we still down 10. Like, who are you shushing? Like, you can't. Like, that should. I feel like that should be a penalty.
Exactly.
You know, like the celebration police should come out and like if you do something stupid when you're losing, then yeah. But again, that's two old men telling the kids to get off their grass.
That's not even that. That is fundamentals. If you're losing, now granted, what did MJ say? It's easy to talk trash when you're up,
right?
But now when the game is even and you talk trash, it's totally different.
Now it gotta mean something.
And it seems like when Washington does that, and I'm just talking about Washington, but I'll say this: when anybody does that, you're celebrating, little small minuscule plays you should have been making in the first or the second quarter, and you do that. It's like you're saying, "Oh, when I get back up, I'm gonna kick your ass." Yeah, but you're never gonna get back up. I'm not gonna let you up.
You just saying that brings up
discipline issue.
One of my favorite people in the world when it comes to this situation. It's the dirty 30. It's the Laurent Landry. Laurent Landry can tackle you after a 12-yard gain, get up, and it's the flex. He flexed and he's showing his muscles. You gained 40 yards, but he hit you clean. He flexed, and again, I'm like, dog, he gained 40 yards. What we flexing for?
Mm-hmm.
I get that.
And it's crazy because I used to always say that about him too. And I love Laurent Landry. I always said, we haven't had a safety tandem since Area 51. That was the last great safety tandem. And before that, to be honest, and this most people wouldn't agree with this, but I think Brad Edwards and Danny Copeland was like the greatest safety combo that we had during the Super Bowl runs because they communicated so well. You rarely saw them get beat.
Hold on, now I gotta think. So 87 would be A. Walton and Todd Bowles.
Yeah.
82 will be Mark Murphy and Ken Kofi. So you know what? I can't give you that one. And the only reason I can't give you that one is a little biased because Ken Coffey was my dude. So I would go with Ken Coffey and Mark Murphy on that.
See, so, I was Danny Copeland was my guy, man. Danny Copeland, and we had a rarity. We had a white safety, and he was smart. And I fell in love with safety play because of Ronnie Lott. But I watched him. I said, man, I got a great safety here. Like all we got to do is put another guy behind him. So when he gets old, and it's time for him to go, we got somebody that's going to learn from him. Did we do that? No.
I mean, before we get too far down memory lane, the Brad Edwards Copeland thing was one of the unique things about that defense that year, because I think Charles Mann, Andre Collins, Alvoy Mays, Darrell Green were the only players that were drafted by that team on that roster. Fred Stokes, Eric Williams, Tim Johnson, free agents.
Don't forget about Bobby Johnson. Bobby Johnson was a rookie. He would have
been drafted. So linebackers was Kurt Gouveia, drafted.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Millen, signed. Andre Collins, drafted. Wilbur Marshall, signed.
Mm-hmm.
Safeties, we already talked about Copeland and Edwards, Alvoy Mays, Martin Mayhew, and Darrell Green. Darrell Green's the only other person they drafted. So it's like 5 or 6 guys on that team that got drafted. Now let's go back and bring it back to where we are now. So now we're at a point where we gave up 24-0 in the first half against Philly, 22-0 first half against Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 46-0 in the first half of a ball game. I don't know. Even Joe Gibbs kicked over a Gatorade table and said Jiminy Crickets. At what point does Ron cuss the team out? Like these starts can't happen. Like I don't know what did. Actually, that's what I wanted to tell you today. That's what I heard. So this lady said Washington has this crazy stat, and she was like, they were like, "What's the stat?" She called into Sirius XM. She said it's 87, and they were like, "What's 87?" She was like, "That's the sleep number for the Washington Redskins on this season so far. They've just slept their way through the first halves all year long." So, yeah, it's crazy, but it's sad because they have. But it's been this way since he's been here. Like outside of one, with the 14 points in the first half, we don't get off to the starts.
And that's, I thought we fixed that. That start. And Ron went off in the post-game press conference. He went off on Carson Wentz. He went off on something that Jimmy G had reported. He went off on that.
Right.
I know Ron has that fire. And BJ said something last season. He said, I wonder if, Ron going through the cancer diagnosis and fighting cancer. He says, I wonder if that took a little something out of him, not mentally, but just that fire. Because, you're tired fighting cancer. You're tired. And wonder if it took something out of him. But here's my thing. If you don't go now, I'm not saying go in and pull a Mike Singletary and drop your pants in the middle of the floor.
Right.
Go in there and pull at this point, pull a Mike Singletary and drop your pants in the middle of the floor. Pull a Mike Holmgren and fire yourself at halftime. But when it comes to adjustments, if we can see at home what teams are doing against us that are successful in the first quarter, and you're not making adjustments in game, you can see the same thing we're saying, and you're not making adjustments, there's a problem. And you bring up Joe Gibbs. Joe Gibbs would throw a playbook in a trash at the halftime and say, "Nah, we going with this." He did it in 91 against the Giants. Couldn't get anything done. So he started running counter trade, gut seal, and it opened up what he wanted to do with that sprint bomb.
So I agree and I disagree on some of this, only because I think at certain times a coach can make an adjustment, but if you don't execute it, it don't matter. So I think can't remember if it was JP Finn. No, that's my man Pete. Money Pete Medhurst said like on 3 or 4 of the sacks that Wentz took, it was 6 seconds in the pocket. And then the worst thing for offensive linemen is like when you think your guy is somewhere else and then you realize he's right there beside you, that makes you look bad. So like Charles Leno on one of those Brandon Graham sacks, like he had him sealed up like 10 and 11 yards behind the line, but the way Carson Wentz escaped the pocket, he escapes back and he goes back into the sack. Like literally, it was just he gave away a couple sacks that Sunday. Mm-hmm. And it's sad. I mean, it's not sad, but it's bad for the offensive linemen because they get the brunt of the fans. They don't get the excuse or the benefit of the doubt because the quarterback didn't escape the pocket the right way. And I think that's the one thing, kind of as a preview for this week coming up. Like Daniel Jones did a good job Monday night getting out of the pocket, going forward, and not going side to side. So that's something that hopefully Carson saw, and he'll take away.
You know, you talk about this Philly team. Jalen Hurts, 22 of 35, 340 yards, 3 touchdowns. Miles Sanders didn't have the type of day that you said, but he still had 15 carries, 46 yards.
Well, I mean, but you don't have to if Devontae Smith has what
8 catches, 169.
But I think he had 140 in like the first quarter. I mean, the first half.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, like yeah.
AJ Brown, 5 catches, 85 yards. Both him and Smith had a touchdown. Pascal, 3 catches, 18 yards. Dallas Goedert, 3 catches, 26 yards. Defensively, TJ Edwards a sack. Brandon Graham, 2.5 sacks. Reddick, a sack and a half. Hargrave, a sack. Sweat, a sack and a half. Cox, a sack and a half. Like
TJ Edwards. Remember that name. He is the typical 40. I mean, I'm sorry, not the 49. The typical Eagles linebacker, guy that most people don't know about. He hops on the screen. He might play only well for 2 years, but he gives you something. So, like, they have this history where, if I remember correctly, they used to have this kid, Jordan Hicks, who's now, I think, in Arizona. They used to play at Texas. When he played in Philly, he was good. The kid that we signed that's on IR, Gentry, he played well for a couple games. He was serviceable. And sometimes that's all you need from your linebacker. You don't need him to be great. You just need him not to mess it up. And then this kid, Edwards, he just seemed to be around the football all night long. And it's one of those things where I just felt like it's a Philly thing.
It's a nose. You got to have a nose for the ball, baby.
Yeah.
Got to have a nose for the ball. And, you know, before we move on to our second topic and our final topic, let's just wrap this up, put it in a bow, because we can't talk about it anymore. It's in the can. Lessons learned in this game. What lessons should they have learned after this loss? 24-8, you lose. You score a safety, a touchdown. You don't even get an extra point. You don't get a field goal. You get nothing. You lose. You get nothing. Good day, sir.
No soup for you. I think it starts for me, I think I need Sadiq Charles to be healthy, or I need Spencer Larson, who I know he's on IR, but hopefully he can come back week 5 or week 6, because the center position is down a level because Schweitzer was all over the place with his snaps. And as a QB, when it comes to snaps, you got to have the ball in a decent place every time. When you're bending down to pick up a snap and you're picking your eyes back up, you lose a second of whatever's going on down the field. I even shout out to my cousin, Eric Willer. I always joke with him whenever I see a bad snap. I'm like, yo, if you got a couple snaps left in your system, you need to go to Ashburn. But it's a simple thing. When it's a comfort level for a quarterback. Like if you know where the ball is going to come out of that snap every time, it's easy as opposed to you having to guess. So that was one takeaway I had. Trey Turner's done. I thought he was the worst offensive lineman last year in Pittsburgh, one of the worst I watched. And it doesn't help that my best friend is a Pittsburgh fan, and like he called him every name but his God-given under the sun when we watched the games. But Trey Turner, I thought he was done. I didn't think it was a smart move. I thought trading him out for essentially he got traded out for Eric Flowers. I didn't like that because you knew you weren't signing Sheriff. You can't pay a guard 19, 20 million. It just doesn't make sense mathematically.
Here's a question. Speaking of Eric Flowers, he's on the street. Are you calling him? Now, 2 years ago, he was the best guard in the league. He was rated the best, but that was under Bill Callahan. Bill Callahan did something with him that I said, you know, when we signed him, I was like, he can't play tackle. He has to move inside the guard. You put him opposite of Rouillet on the left side. You got Sheriff on the right. Baby, we got ourselves a O-line. You got the great Morgan Moses. And who do we have it left? And at that time, we still had Trent. I was like, you know, we got ourselves probably the greatest offensive line in the world.
So, last year, if I don't know how much you pay attention to Brian Baldinger's breakdowns, but
A lot.
Baldy had
A lot.
Flowers and Leno in one of his breakdowns a couple times during the season last year. So I didn't understand. I didn't mind seeing Norwell come in and play with other side, and then you have Leno. You have Flowers. So I didn't understand the move at the time, and I still don't kind of get it. I mean, because I'm a Shanahan fan, understand that guards, you feel like you can get guards anywhere, but I think right now our guards are killing us from a protection standpoint, and they have to do something. And I also think some of those plays, you can't always have Bates being one-on-one. There were a couple times last week, Bates was one-on-one with the end. Brandon Graham fed him his lunch, but then he manhandled Hassan Reddick. So it's those type of things that you got to kind of watch and figure out in your scheme. I would love to see him chipping and helping. But again, he can't be one-on-one.
Speaking of offensive linemen, I love the fire I seen come out of Sam Cosmi.
But Cosmi's he's having that speed power issue. If you pay attention towards the end, especially Brandon Graham was just alternating. He was just like, all right, I'm gonna go through your chest this time. Next time I'll go around you. And he got one real good sack. He played like a non-technique. He got a nice chop on the hands, got around the edge, and just got right to Wentz. That's one of the ones that wasn't on Wentz. That was just on the line, not holding up.
Now, here's the thing that I learned. Now, I'm a Schweitzer guy. Schweitzer is one of my guys. I love Wes Schweitzer. And him playing center, it seemed like they didn't practice enough together. It seemed like it seemed first snap. You see him turning around, you see him looking, and like it's like they're having a communication issue. Like this should have been practice starting back in OTAs. Everybody that's available to play center, I need you to play center. I need you to play guard. And even though you normally play tackle, I need guys to move around and be versatile. So when it happens at any time during the season, it's natural. And Schweitzer is a good center.
He's a good center. But there's a difference between being a good center and a great center. Like playing center is not. Shout out to my guy Jay Gruden because he said it this week. He was like he got nervous. In the situation was when his center went down because the center makes all the calls. And I know for us, Chase Roullier was making all the protection calls. So that's another thing you got to think about. So now if he's making all the protection calls and it's good, but Schweitzer struggles in that area because he doesn't do it on a regular basis. So now you're doing that, and then it's maybe him and Carson. So it's a thing of growth too. Like sometimes you had the greatest plan, like Mike Tyson said, until you get hit in the mouth. So Schweitzer might have been good, and then Jordan Davis coming down his chest, all 355 of them, or Hargrave or Fletcher Cox. Now you looking. When you take your head down, looking through to see where the snap goes, and you look back up and 91 right there, you like, ooh, let me get this back a little bit quicker. Trying to steal some seconds.
And what's crazy is you talk about centers. And I was thinking about Mike Webster today. And I was thinking about him and, all the great centers that we watch play. And I'm like, we know how important this is. How important, especially continuity. Why is it that Washington went into this game and it looked like, okay, yeah, the continuity was broke, but something should have been done to have a comfort zone like with Chase Roullier, or the way Bradshaw and Mike Webster were, the way Dermontti Dawson and Cordell Stewart.
Yo, hold on. Are you like one of my boys just started watching Jeff Neal. He's one of the biggest Pittsburgh fans I know. And now you're just dropping all this Pittsburgh stuff. You're killing me, man. You're killing me.
Well, I mean, when you want to talk about great centers, you start in Pittsburgh because Mike Webster.
Can you go to Miami? Go to Miami and give me Dwight Stevenson.
Okay.
All right. I mean, come on, man. I don't need all this. I don't need all this Pittsburgh pressure. You know what I'm saying?
Damani Dawson is one of my favorite. Him and Jeff Bosca are like my favorite centers. So, but
all right. So stay there. So you said Bostic. Like there was a drop off when Bostic got hurt, and you had to go to Grimm, or you had to go to McKenzie. It wasn't substantial, but there was a drop.
But do you remember when Bostic got benched?
Right,
and he was on long snapper, and they moved him over to Grimm over to center.
Right.
That was the 87 season. That was a strike shortened season. They brought in a guy to play guard that they had picked up. That was one of the replacement players.
Oh no! That team in 87, that guard is R.C. Tillman from the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, but now hold on.
R.C. Tillman was a man.
But
R.C. Tillman used to give us problems whenever we played them, and they had William Andrews and company running, and Gerald Riggs, running up and down the field on us. They was running behind R.C. Tillman. I got that. Come back, and then in 91, who's on the team? Gerald Riggs.
Right.
But okay,
but no. So what happened was Grimm moved over from guard to center, and Boston got benched. Mm-hmm. The team struggled. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a real bad struggle, but the team struggled. Then when Grimm got hurt, Boston came back in. He never gave up his starting spot again. Right. Now, Chase Roullier, most people in the fan base don't like Chase Roullier. Chase Roullier is a major cog. And I say all you got to do is you got Chase Roullier in the middle. We had the bookends. You know, when we had Trent and we had Morgan, both are gone. I still love them to death. But then all you had to do was put guards next to him. You had 3 out of the 5. Then at one point you had 4 out of 5. Then you had 3 out of 5 again. It's like we can never sync up to have everything all at once.
Yeah, I think also what hurt them was the way the second round this year in the draft went. There was a kid out of Texas A&M. I think it's like DeMarcus or Jamarcus Neal from Texas A&M that I thought they would have taken, but he went a little bit earlier than people expected. So then you end up having to do some shuffling. And I think also what hurt this team is for some reason they didn't believe in Tim Settle enough. And this is where I think what's the word I want to use? There's a gap, disparity between with Sam Mills Jr. and maybe Jack Del Rio, and maybe they didn't fight enough for certain guys. I think Ioannidis would have been gone no matter what.
I disagree with that when it happened.
But I think that became a byproduct. And I think lazily we're saying it was because of the Wentz contract. But I think they were trying to do some other things in that time frame as well. The other thing I didn't understand with this team was when you go into the draft, my goal was I always had a running back in round 3, had a linebacker in round 4, either 5. Because if you look at a team like Jacksonville that we just played, Jacksonville loaded up with their linebackers. They got rid of Miles Jack. They brought in Devin Lloyd, who was a kid that I thought we should have took in the first round. They went and got Chad Mama from Wyoming. And like if you watch, I keep telling people Jacksonville's defense, when we get to week 10, week 11, you're not going to want to play Jacksonville. You're not going to want to play Jacksonville. So now let's take that transition. We've talked about this loss, and let's come full circle because now it's Tuesday. We about to go into Wednesday,
and what weekend?
And as fans, or not fans, but as people watching the sport, we got to now turn ourselves to our opponent on Wednesday, on Sunday. Ooh. So for me, I don't think it's been Dallas week in a long time. Like I've tried to manufacture it. Like 2012, I think that Thanksgiving, I think that was the most excitement I had about a Dallas week. Maybe 2012 was also the year at the end of the season where we played Dallas to get in the playoffs.
Rob Jackson's timely interception.
Right. Was there one with Kirk's year where we played Dallas for like a playoff berth, or was that somebody else?
Was that 2016? That was Kirk's.
The year he got us to the promised land was 2015, I think. I think there was a Dallas. I think there's a Dallas game in that stretch But then after that, I mean, I don't know. I don't believe in calling something a rivalry when you ain't good. Like if you ain't there, you getting participation trophies. I mean, you can't really be anybody's rival. You can't be like, oh, Dallas want to see us. Dallas ain't worried about you. Dallas worried about Philly.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like at this point, if Dallas has any kind of rival, it's Philly. And then maybe the Giants are next, but I'm not even counting that because the Giants are having their first winning season in like since what 2005, something crazy like that. So it's something weird, some weird number. So like, yeah, I just Dallas week used to mean something. I used to get hyped for it. You know, now it's just another week. It's another week in the calendar.
Let me say this, and I'm pulling this up now because I want to be able to have the everything. I want to have it at my fingertips. This hasn't been a rivalry per se. It wasn't a rivalry last season. We got blown out the first game 56-21. The second one was a little closer. The year before that, 2020, we blew them out both games.
Right, but that's the Ben DiNucci, Andy Dalton games.
Yeah. And that first game in Dallas, oh, I thought we couldn't play no better football than that. We played great football in 2020. Yeah. But it just didn't translate. And I was like, well, we had another more established quarterback. And don't get me wrong, I love Heineke. It's just we needed that veteran because he hadn't come into his own. But this hasn't been.
Was that Kyle Allen in 2020?
2020 was that
might have been Kyle Allen.
Was that Kyle Allen
or Alex? Depending on what game that is, that's one of them. Because in 2020, our quarterback crew was those three was Allen, Heineke, not Heineke. Allen,
yeah, Heineke, because
and Alex Smith. And then Heineke didn't play into the playoffs. He played like one game late in the season, like Carolina. He came in and played against. Yeah. And after that, he didn't play again until the Tampa game.
Tampa Bay, yeah. So who did? But either way, I still like Heineke. Exactly. Like, look, we done had so many quarterbacks in the last 3 years alone. So, but
I think the number is 9. I think 10. I think it's 10 different starting quarterbacks at any point during the season. And then I think this is the 5th year that they open the season with a new starting quarterback.
Bruh. Looking at this hasn't been a rivalry. I don't think this has been a true rivalry since the 80s. I mean, you had.
I think in the 90s you had a little bit, and then when Norv was there, like through like about 2000, like the early 2000s, I think it was still there because that game, I want to say it's 05. It's Vanderjagt lining up for the field goal at FedEx because I know this has got to be 2005 because I think this is the last time I was in FedEx on a regular basis. They line up for the kick. Troy Vincent comes through, blocks the kick. Sean picks it up.
That was 2006.
That's 2006. Okay. So the face mask happens. Boom. Run down the field. You get the 15 yards. You get Nick Novak to line up for the field goal. Nick Novak made that the most interesting 40-plus yard field goal in the history of the world. But the second it went through, I remember looking at my dad and was like, yo, it's going to be a whole lot of babies being made today off after this game. Because that stadium, that was the loudest I've ever heard FedEx.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say since then, my guess would be the loudest would be that Robert run against the Vikings. But let me not get sidetracked.
Here's the thing. We can look back at this rivalry and, this is a lopsided rivalry. It's lopsided, and the Cowboys are well in the lead. But now, when you have both teams as the upper echelon,
we're better,
right? Because you growing up in this area, and I tell people this all the time: you either love Washington or you love Dallas. Right. There is no in between. Now, most of the youngsters that love Dallas because they were born in the late 80s and they grew up in the 90s, that's because you saw Dallas winning. You're not a real Dallas fan. The furthest you've been is Texas State, Texas Avenue. Stop it.
Well, let's you gotta give the narrative some credence because there are some guys that also acknowledge the fact that the Washington football team, the Washington Redskins, the Washington Commanders, the Washington print symbols, all of their names that we have intact, they were one of the last teams to actually have a black ball player on their team. So some of these guys coming up, I've had conversations with guys and their dads, impressed that upon them. So that's also fighting, like that's part of Washington battling itself in its own right. And then now the fact that they're losing and they can't get right, that's another issue. So Washington's gonna have a situation where between the 35 name changes, the fact that they haven't been really winning, the scandals, like you're losing fans at a rate that you can't really recover. You're gonna end up being like the Chargers, where you're gonna have some of your diehards that only stick around, but outside of them, like where's that next generation coming from? Because you're not giving them anything to lean on.
And that brings me to my next point. And I said, is it even Dallas week? I used to get hyped up. And just a couple years ago, I was really hyped for Dallas week. And, I want to say that had to be 20. Let me look this up. It's 2012. Of course, I was hyped up for that. 2018, I was hyped up for that game that was at FedEx. That was one we won that by a field goal.
Okay.
I was hyped up for that. Of course, the 2020, and I was hyped up for those. Last year, I didn't even get ginned up for this, and I get ginned up for Cowboys games always. But you talk about losing the fan base, and I try to explain this to the younger ones in the fan base. Y'all are okay with this. I'm saying, people, man, fuck the Redskins. I'm done with this. Okay, you got to understand. There's going to be ups. There's going to be downs. There's going to be peaks. There's going to be valleys. For 40 years, almost 41 years, I've watched this team. I've watched this team go 10-6, 14-2. I've watched this team be rated the best, greatest Super Bowl winning team of all time. I've watched that. I've lived through that. You're coming in on the back half on those lean years, and it's been 30 years of lean years. We'd have had some high notes, but you're telling me you don't want to be a fan anymore because of mediocrity, and you've only been a fan for 2-3 years. Try being a fan for 40 plus years, and you're not used to mediocrity. You grew up with winning.
So think about this. Like, I think Washington benefited the most from being Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. Mm-hmm. So if you think about the 20 years, so I'm born in 76. So I remember stories that my dad used to tell me. There's two people that my dad will always tell me about. It's Sonny Jurgensen for the Redskins, and it's downtown Freddie Brown for Seattle. They will live in infamy in my life whenever I have any conversation with people. But to get back to my point, it's Washington for a while. Just they were like the Cubs. They were the lovable losers. Like Sonny would entertain you for 3 quarters, 4 quarters. You go home and lose, but you had a good game. You had an interesting ball game. And then you had the Jack Pardee years, and then all of a sudden you get Joe Gibbs. And Joe Jackson Gibbs puts you on the limelight, puts you in the centerfold. You're now one of the most prestigious franchises because of the way you operated, the way you did things. You there was no scandals. Well, there were scandals, but they weren't coming out because the DC police wasn't letting you announce that John Riggins got arrested or Sonny Jurgensen got arrested. Those things weren't happening. So now we get to a point where Dan Snyder takes over. And even him taking over was weird because they waited so long that they struggled to sign free agents that year. And I think that was 99. Mm-hmm. So Trent Green, who would have been our quarterback, leaves because he's like, I don't want to trust the instability. I don't know what's coming up next. So then you end up with the Brad Johnson, the George, and all that stuff. But I say all of that to say, like, this franchise has had its had like lean years and then this great middle passage. And then now we're in a 30-year stretch of just, I don't know. but now, we're so, social media has made us so instant gratification that you don't figure out, oh, I gotta stick through this. It's, oh man, Snyder did this again. I don't want to give Snyder my money. Or it's this team can't get right, so I'm gonna go root for Baltimore. Or I'm gonna go root for Kansas City. Or I'm gonna go root for the Rams. I'm gonna be a Rams fan all of a sudden. So now it's like now fandom is loose. You know what I'm saying? It's no dedication to who you love. So now you can just go and be a fan of whomever. Like I joke with people because, well, that's a whole other story. So, but yeah, it's just fandom is just different now than what we were brought up on, And I always laugh at fans because they were like, "Oh, you never been to Texas." Well, that's an old mantra now. You know what I'm saying? We don't root for the team that was in our city because instead of you just having 4, 5, 7, and 9, and the only time you saw a team play football was your team. Now you're watching slates of games with teams. I always say this with Maryland. Like I always feel like Maryland University biggest flaw was they never had a thing where we always saw Maryland on TV. So Maryland never got a chance to have a fan base that was all about Maryland because I was watching Notre Dame, I was watching Nebraska, Oklahoma, and all that stuff. So,
and it's funny you say that because I grew up watching Georgetown play all the time, and if you old enough and you from the area, they used to play at night during the week. That was the only basketball that was on. I didn't have cable, so you watch that on regular TV. You watched Alonzo Mourning and Dikembe Mutombo. That's what made me fall in love with Georgetown. But then it just got to the point I was like, I love Georgetown, but I bounced from team to team in basketball. I used to bounce from team. I went one year I was a UCLA fan, and then I was a UMass fan. Yeah, the year they won the Final Four.
Yeah.
Of course, but that was because I was. And then when the Fab Five came in, I was a huge Fab Five fan because they were always on TV.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, because you're not gonna say nothing about that. My mother keeps laughing about that, and she keeps laughing about the whole T-shirt thing. I just want to let you know that.
What? I just love your mother because she has great taste. I mean, what kind of parent wouldn't want their child to walk around with a championship T-shirt on? I mean, you're crying. If you're crying about Michigan losing, maybe if I give you a North Carolina Donald Williams shirt, I can hear your tears. You know what I'm saying?
Moving right along. But that fandom, it's not the same. And you hit the nail on the head when you said everybody wants to win now. Right. Nobody wants to go through the process of building. And the thing is, BJ said it. He said it's like a DC thing. You start building, and then all of a sudden you think you at a point, and then somebody in your division, they leapfrog you because they build a little bit better. And it seems like we always shoot ourselves in the foot when it comes to building.
So I think this is a great. I'm glad you brought this up because our local radio guys, whether it's Pete Medhurst and Chris Russell or Danny Rouillet and Grant Paulson, they kind of brought this topic up, and they were like, "Are we the fourth best team in the division?" After watching the Giants the last couple of days or last night. And I don't think the Giants are ahead of us in the rebuild. I think the difference is the Giants took advantage of their first two games much better than we did. They got the 2-0 that we were supposed to get. Because if you watch the Carolina game, Carolina just shot themselves in the foot. And that's the only reason they don't beat the Giants in week 2. Carolina just couldn't stop Carolina. Or whatever you call it. It's just like Detroit. On Sunday, I just said Detroit just lost the most Detroit ball game you could ever see. Detroit should have never lost to Minnesota. Detroit's better than Minnesota. I don't care what they say. I seen it. I seen it up close. I watched. I mean, I got red zone. I'm watching the game, and it's just like Detroit just kept shooting themselves in the foot. So, but getting back to the Commanders, it's like we have an issue, and I keep saying this, and I'm gonna say this till I'm blue in the face. when I watch other teams, they have a type. Like right now, if somebody said to you right now, hey, like that girl's pretty, you got a type. Like if she fits in that type, boom, you're good to go. That's you. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, when we pick players, we don't have this type. And I get jealous of Pittsburgh because they have a type. Like they don't care if you're the perfect prospect, but if you can rush the passer, we're gonna let you just rush the passer and like you just be the best pass rusher you can be. And you get that from Greg Lloyd, you get that from James Harrison, you get that from the kid number 56 that's rushing the passer for him now. You get that from TJ Watt. So it's proof in the pudding. And it's like when I think of Washington and I sit down, and even over the last 30 years, outside of like Sean Taylor, Santana Moss, Clinton Portis, of course, the last two I named we didn't draft. But there aren't guys, and I'll give LeVar Arrington some credence here, but there aren't guys that I'm like, ooh, that guy right there, that's a player. Like even Ryan Kerrigan, I just called him Captain Tryhard. Like he give you the most effort sacks in the world, and he'll get you 11. But that 11 just would be 11 regular sacks. They sometimes they did impact the game, but they didn't always. And it was just like he was never that force. Like I never felt like teams had to go out their way. I know I'm hurting your feelings right now, but I felt like teams didn't just have to go out their way to stop Ryan. And maybe that's because the guy on the other side wasn't electric either, you know. And then when your best defensive lineman comes from Hampton, like I always tell you, it's just certain things I just can't deal with.
I'm gonna say this with Ryan Kerrigan and Professor Lucky and myself. We've had endless conversations about this, and he brought up a point, and I had to go look it up. And I said, "Damn, he's right. Ryan Kerrigan will give you double-digit sacks, but if he give you 13, 7 out of those 13 came against the New York Giants. His interception for a touchdown came against the Giants. He used to terrorize Eli Manning. That truth is truth. And Lucky was always right with that. And I give him credit for that. And you talk about guys that aren't. LeVar Arrington's biggest problem here, they tried to play him out of position.
So again, this is my Jamin Davis point. When you look at a guy, the guy, he froths at the mouth, he ready just to go get it. You don't tell him to think. Tell me a time you told a German Shepherd, hey, I know he an attack dog, but I need you to wait before you attack. You don't do that. You just tell him sick.
Exactly.
And that's the problem this team has had when it comes to talent evaluation. Even with Wilbur Marshall. Wilbur Marshall was his worst years were the years he was here. When he was with the Bears, he was killing it. But we tried to make him fit with Pettibone and whatever he was doing, and he didn't always let Wilbur go, but there still was kind of like that little bit of a leash on him, you know. So Wilbur wasn't true Wilbur, but he had his moments because he was Wilbur. Mm-hmm. And I think that was the problem that I always had with this franchise is like you get dogs, but you can't make them be puppies. Like you gotta let the dog go. Big dog. I always say this: big dog gotta eat, and you gotta let the big dog eat.
Now, let me ask you this, and we'll end it here.
Okay.
Is Dallas Week dead?
Yes.
Is it dead and thinking, or is it dead and can be resurrected?
No. So what's going to have to happen for this to get resurrected is it's not going to be 3 days in the tomb and then, you know, the rock gets moved out. It ain't that type of resurrection that's going to happen. It's going to have to be a situation where these teams play each other for something meaningful. So when week 10, 12 come along and we're fighting for like trying to get the higher seed in the playoffs, that's when the rivalry comes back. That's going to be the CPR to bring this back to life. It can't be, oh, we 4-10 and they 11-5 or vice versa. And that's how no, it's not going to resuscitate this rivalry that way. This has to be back in the 80s when Gary Hogaboom was dropping back and Dexter Manley gives him the concussion and Darryl Grant runs the ball into the end zone. It's got to be that situation. And that's the only way this comes back to life in any shape, form, or fashion. So Daron Payne has to either take out Cooper Rush and we get on a run or whatever. That's it, man. That's the only way this becomes a rivalry again, in my eye.
Because it's been a couple of years since we played for anything meaningful. And one stat that I always like to bring up, Dallas has never beat us for anything significant in the playoffs. And I always like to hold that over Dallas Cowboy fan heads. But like I said on the Sunday Rise, Dallas will win their game against the Giants last night, and they did it handily.
So real quick, Dallas's defense. They had 12, I want to say 12 hurries, 6 sacks. So a team that's coming off of giving up 9 sacks, what do we do? And I know this is premature, and maybe we put a pin in this and we put this on blast, like our number one topic for
Sunday morning.
Sunday morning.
Yep.
But like that's the question we got to ask ourselves going into Sunday morning. Like, what do we do different to stop 9 sacks from happening? To stop, I think Detroit had 6, 87.
What do
How
you do?
We stop this brigade, this flood of sacks from happening?
How do you stop MPP? Because that's a problem. The Micah Parsons problem is what it is. How do you stop that? Like, nobody's found the answer for that. And all right. That dude got a motor, man.
I'm gonna nerd out a little bit for you. I'm gonna nerd out a little bit here. So Dallas has one of the most underrated lines, but again, Dallas has a tight, explosive guys. So you got Micah Parsons on one side, you got Lawrence either on the same side or on the other side, depending on how you do it. You got Dorrance Armstrong, who was the high school number 1 player of the year, but somehow he decided to go to Kansas. I guess he didn't get enough money from everywhere else to go somewhere of relevance. Then you have a kid. I think the kid's Sam Mitchell, but I don't know, it's Sam Williams that they drafted in like the 2nd round. And Baldy did a breakdown on him. So when you get a chance and you look at, there's a preseason breakdown on this kid. This kid is an animal, and like he's explosive. He's got all the quick twitch tools. And when I watch that, I have nightmares. Like I don't understand. Like I feel sorry for Carson Wentz. Like I think honestly, this week they might want to put Sam Howell in his jersey just in case, because we might need to go to 3 QBs.
I agree. I'm not even gonna say nothing, but I'm just gonna say I agree.
Yeah, I don't know how this team protects in this right now, and maybe this is just I haven't gotten to tomorrow's Wednesday, so Wednesday I go from being reactionary to being more philosophical. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm like the team. You buried the last week, and then we started new and going looking forward. So tomorrow I might have a better outlook, but we don't do no show tomorrow, so we good. So you're getting all the reactionary.
Well, that's all our time because we don't do no show tomorrow. We ain't coming back till Thursday. Break down that Thursday night game, Bengals versus the Dolphins, and I've really got a question. I'm gonna have a question about Tua, and should he have been allowed back in that game Sunday? That'll come up on Thursday. So please tune in for that because I want to hear what everybody got to say. So, along with not doing no show on Wednesday, that's the Midnight Ride. I'm the big guy KG. We don't do no overtime. We are out of here.